You go. That's the intro. You know what the intro is? It's the Rolling Stones. And start me up because this is the flagship show, 7 p.m. Eastern, with Dean Packard, the creator of Unlock the Middle, but most importantly, the creator of this tool set that we have out there. We have all these educators that are going to be sharing their thoughts, their ideas, because we're not alone. We are not alone. We're all iron sharpens iron philosophy. Josh Tobar, principal of Memorial Pathway Academy in Garland ISD, Garland, USA, ready to rock and roll with another awesome guest. You know, we've had a big trajectory the last week from Sunday to Thursday's Red Zone to today that has to do with a focus point on EB learners. EB learners, because you know what? If you see the news, they're coming. It don't matter where you're at. They're coming, and it's how we support them, making sure that we're the best version of ourselves. And we've had awesome knowledge from last Sunday, Andrea Bittner, to all of the guests that we had on Thursday and today. And in January, we're going to continue our conversation. So if you're in Alaska or you're in Hawaii, if you're in Maine or you're in Florida or anywhere in the 48, we need you. We need to make sure that you tune in. If you're watching this on the rebroadcast, like it. It's crucial that you like it and you share it on all our platforms, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. We're still working on the LinkedIn thing.
We're working on LinkedIn, man. Yeah, we're working on it.
But ultimately, we need you part of this and share it with others because you know what? Our kids deserve the best version of ourselves. What do you think about that, Dean Packard?
Hey, Josh Tovar, iron sharpens iron. You're right. Emergent, bilingual, every student, any student that comes through our doors in public education, we own them. And they deserve the very best opportunity to have access and equity to their learning. And we've been talking about that now for the last few weeks. And I'm telling you what, I'm learning so much from some of the best in the field. And I'll tell you, what they do is super important for the success of all kids that enter our schools. Josh, how are you? It's Sunday night. You know Sunday nights are all about getting a little bit better. So great to connect from Massachusetts to Texas here, my friend.
Yeah, we had this thing called fall break just finished, kicked in at the right time. Yeah, I know. We're going into the second quarter. Second quarter, baby, learning. And I know that you guys started a little bit late. I know you guys started in October the 1st? I don't know when you guys started.
End of August, man. End of August. We don't start in 1st of August like you guys do down there.
All right, I know. But it's good stuff. It's good stuff, man. And I like, if you guys are not following this guy's going on a journey. So let's do a little side note. This guy went over from being like the king of a middle school, like for 7,000 years. And now he totally threw his cheese and he threw it somewhere else. And he's going through a new journey. So if you're a brand new administrator or you want to be an administrator, look at the journey that this guy's going through. Reach out to him because it's crucial. It's learning points. Because the tools that you had before in a school for 7,000 years that he was at to a brand new high school, different level, you know what? This is the kind of guy you got to reach out to and, pick his brain because he's learning as he goes. He has experience, but not at this level. And now with this type of mentality in regards to middle school mentality to high school mentality. So, it's a great thing. How's it going for you, Dean?
Well, I have that experience because I'm networked with a lot of amazing people, Josh. You know that, including yourself. The greatest thing about social media is that you can pick up the phone, you can connect with anybody, anytime, any capacity that you need to. And again, leadership is all about understanding people and putting in systems in place to make things successful, then celebrating the heck out of it. I'm talking about one of the best guys ever to celebrate people right over there, JT, right from the home state of Texas. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Hey, that's enough about us. 3 minutes and 36 seconds in. Nobody wants to hear about us. Let's get Natalia Heckman in here at this point in time. Come on in. Natalia, welcome to our show. So good to have you with us. Natalia, happy Sunday night to you.
Happy Sunday night to y'all as well. Do you hear I said y'all?
Y'all, you got to be somewhere down south of where? Of Nebraska, I guess, huh? Somewhere. Hey, Natalia, first and foremost, welcome to the show. Why don't you tell our audience a little bit about you, your origin, your story, how you kind of got to where you are today and what you're doing.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm Natalia Heckman. It's the Russian accent that you hear. So I'm Russian. Came to the United States in 1997. So this is, I've been here a while, but I am an educator. I've been in education for almost 17 years now. I started teaching high school in 2007. So it's been quite a ride. I work for Seidlitz Education Consulting now. We are a publishing company. We publish resources. For the most part, we're known for the resources for teachers of multilingual learners. And that's where I'm here today.
Awesome. Welcome, Ollie. Like I said, welcome. We are going to go do a continuation of what we've been talking about the last few weeks. So, Josh, take over from here, bro.
So, Natalia, let's go a little bit deeper. Let's let the audience learn a little bit more about you. How were you as a student? And crucial, you're that transition from Russia to the United States. There must have been a transition, just like our EB students. And along the same way, how did your parents advise, their way of bringing you up, affect you now as an educator, someone that helps EB students?
It's just interesting that you asked me that question. I was not prepared for that question. Nobody ever asked me how my parents' upbringing affected me as an educator. But it might be actually important. I was a very good student. I've always been a good student and never struggled at school. I studied linguistics back at home. I studied English and French before I came to the United States. So my undergraduate from here, from the US, is in literature, and my master's in school leadership, school administration. But back at home, it was all about languages. And my dad told me that education is something that nobody can ever take away from you. You can go anywhere and you can lose your money, you can lose everything you have, but you have your education. So whatever the country was going through in the 90s, he made sure that nothing affects me so I could focus on school. So grateful to him forever and ever.
Well, you know what? Education, it can never be taken away from you. Get those steps, get those degrees, get those things you need to set yourself up for success. We say that to kids all the time. Now, Natalia, who has inspired you throughout your career and who currently motivates you to continue to be you?
I think normally we do pick a role model, and we all have role models as teachers or authors, but I think it's my students who really inspired me throughout my career. And I've never seen so much hardship in my entire life as I saw some of my students were going through as they were in my classroom, and you get to know them, so they open up and they share a little bit. But then I saw their success. And I think that's something that motivates us as educators, because I work with the secondary students. So I may have them for English 1, English 2, and then for an additional practical writing class eventually. But once they graduate, and if you see them come back, and I was in the same classroom for 10 years, so they knew exactly where to find me if they wanted to, which they do. They would come back and they would bring their kids. And it was like, Miss, I'm married. Miss, I have this job. And it's their success that motivates you more than anything.
So let me ask you. Let's before I ask you the next question. How did you transition from Russia to the United States? Was it a difficult transition, or did the foundation that you have in languages in Europe help you? What adversity did you find coming over as our EB students from Nicaragua, El Salvador, Vietnam, different parts of Africa, go through the same trajectory as you did? Well, first of all, did you find any adversity transitioning over, or did what obstacles did you face?
So and this is probably a segue into talking about how all of our emerging bilinguals, all our students are so different. Now, when I came here, first of all, I was an adult language learner. I did not expect to have any really difficulty with languages, thinking, hey, I just, I finished 5 years at the university back at home. But if somebody gave me a language acquisition test back then, in my first year in the country here in the United States, I would probably have maybe advanced high, really like top score in probably reading and writing. But in the oral comprehension, so understanding spoken English at a native pace without accommodations, that was still an issue. And so it's not something that to be taken for granted. We have a lot of concern sometimes about students' comprehension and speaking. So you may have a student who may have a lot of academic background and may be able to read and write, and they would still struggle with comprehension or speaking in the classroom and not being confident. So that was an issue for me. But having so much literacy in my first language, and you might be familiar with that. So students who come to us with lots of formal schooling from their home country and strong foundation of literacy in the first language. That's why we are such advocates for bilingual programs. We want to have students to have really strong foundation in the first language. It's easier for us to acquire the second language, or for me, it was the third language, because it was Russian, there was French, it was English. it's like you have that layer of foundation. You know how languages work, and the next one, it just sits on top of everything else you may already know. But if we have students who come to us with minimal formal education, or SLIFE, students with limited or interrupted student education, that might present an additional challenge for them. So not so much for me, but I saw a lot of that struggle with my students. For me, and I was at the same year when I started teaching high school, my personal children started elementary. So I had a kindergarten at home, and I had no idea how schools in the United States work. And I started teaching on the same day my baby went to kindergarten. And my principal at the time, it was so, oh my gosh, I love my principal to pieces. His name is Don Beck, and he was the one who hired me. And he said, you can take that day off and take your baby to kindergarten. So it's okay. I was like, oh, you know what? There's no way I'm going to miss my first day of school, first day ever teaching. But I did miss that, to take my kindergarten to school. So that was exciting.
That's a memory you don't want to miss.
Exactly. So let's dive into that whole concept right there. When we state, or you bring up that there's no stereotypical EB learner. What do you mean by that?
So, and I know we'll talk about the book that I wrote, Building Better Writers, in a bit, but there's an entire section that I really wanted to address that concept very often. And Andrea Bittner, that you had earlier, she talked about that. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, that's perfect, because we all want to have this understanding that there is no such a thing as a stereotypical language learner. We're all very different as our stories and our pathways into the language, or entry points into the language. For me, literacy was the entry point into the language. So what I mean by that is, if I'm in a classroom and the teacher tells me or gives me directions orally, I will be so confused. I might miss everything. I may not know what to do, because for me, that oral comprehension was an issue. I would say, please give me everything on paper in print and leave me alone. I'll figure it out. Come back in 5 minutes, and that's all I need. That's my entry point. You may have a student on the completely opposite end of that spectrum. So you may have students who have very little literacy. So they may need oral instruction. They may need a lot of support with that oral, just give me instructions orally. Tell me what to do. Show me what to do, because I struggle with literacy. So that's the opposite. So I talk about, or just differentiate there. And this has been done, or has been explored in literature and research for a very long time. So the authors that I cite, they're from 80s and 90s. We have some students who are eye learners, who take in language through their eyes. It means that they learn through print for the most part. It's easier for them to learn through print. Other learners may be ear learners. These are the students who are long-term language learners for the most part. They are more comfortably in oral English and spoken English. Very often, those are our long-term language learners who are socially very comfortable. They are near-native. They've been here since elementary school. So, and those are the kids who would tell me, Miss, I speak better English than you do. And I said, yes, you do. That's absolutely so. So they don't have an accent. They are very comfortable socially. For them, they pick up language in that most natural, authentic way by ear. And as teachers, we want to be aware of some of these nuanced differences, because it just makes more sense when we can differentiate some of our strategies.
Natalia, now when you look at this, and first of all, you wrote a book. Congratulations. It's hard to manage a family, work, and be an author. So congratulations for doing that. And congratulations for trying to make people better out there by selling the content that you have within. So let's talk about your book for a second. What inspired you to write your book, and what can a reader expect from the content within the book?
So the idea of the book actually came around. I started working for Silence 4 years ago. This is my 4th year with the company. And when I first joined them, it was actually during one of the presentations that I made for teachers of language learners, that was focused on the composition that all of our students in Texas have to write in English 1 and English 2. That was our test is called STAR test, or EOC. That's how we refer to it. But I think later, when I did research, there's pretty much a version of it in every state where students have to write a composition. So after about 4 to 5 years of trying everything and anything in my classroom, I pretty much narrowed to a few strategies that were good for the kids, were beneficial. I saw results. I saw some perfect scores. So in Texas, the perfect score is 4. And I got some papers that scored 4 back then. Now it's different. Now we had completely changed test. And the book that you referenced is geared towards a new model of the test. But back then, that was something that to celebrate. The kids who scored that really well, they were newcomers, they were emerging bilinguals. So I wanted to share their success, and not just so much the journey or success of the students, because I would never expect anyone to rely on my empirical experience, just like anecdotal experience in deciding what to do in the classroom. I really wanted a collection of activities that worked, and I wanted research that explained why these things work. Because as a teacher, I had no time to read any research. Zero. We don't have time. We through I would say 12 years, I barely had my head above the water the entire time. So, and it's only when you start. So I started presenting at conferences, sharing those, just the writing unit. And many districts would say, hey, can you come into our district and share with us? And so I started presenting. But when I started working for Sidlets, when I actually had time to read research and think through why those all these things that actually help my students work. And there's rhyme and reason to everything we do. So there's plenty. It's a combination of when it comes to content, and I'll talk about the structure of the book if you'd like, but it's a combination of rationale why teaching writing to language learners have to be slightly different and have to address certain needs that our students may have that native speakers do not have. And what are some activities that can support that writing instruction?
Good stuff,
right? Nice. Hey, greetings to Central. Thanks, Coach, for being here, and also to Sean. Thank you for your tidbits that you're dropping there on the thread. Thank you for being here, part of the show. And let's get into that. Everybody, take out your pens, take out your phones, whatever, because we're gonna get into Natalia and what she wrote about in her books. So talk to us about those writing concepts. So if you're out there in Iowa, if you're out there in South Dakota and you got a lot of Hondureños coming up there, start taking notes, because this is where the rubber meets the road. Talk to us, Natalia. Talk about those writing concepts that you want to put out there to the world to help our children.
So if I have to just narrow into one foundational concept of what are some things we want to remember when it comes to writing, and it's actually probably applies to more than writing, but any output. So if we look at language, so I'm looking at input when I take in information and I understand. So it may be reading and understanding, or listening to you and understanding. That's my input. Comprehension level. I may develop a pretty high comprehension level without being able to produce language, without being able to speak, and without being able to write. So we do have quite a few students, and you'll notice that where their language production, so how much they can produce, is much behind their comprehension. I'll give you an example. It's deviating just a little bit, but I think that makes sense. So my father came to visit me here, and he was not happy just being a stay-at-home grandfather. He wanted to make money and do something, and he has that personality, go get and do things. So he told me, he does not speak English at all. Now, all he can say is, my name is Boris, which his name is Boris, I'm from Russia. That's it. That's the extent of the language that he can produce. He said, you need to help me pass that CDL driver's license. The entire test is in English. There is no Russian version of that test. And if you're familiar with it, it's pretty involved. So, and he said, well, Dad, you don't speak English. How are you going to pass this test? He says, well, you're a teacher. You should know. It's multiple choice. I don't need to speak English or write in English to pass this test. All I need is to figure out what the questions ask. Guess by those question words. And because he's an engineer, he's a mechanical engineer back at home, he can, all those 18-wheelers that he was going to drive, he can probably take them apart and put them back together. So he passed the test on the first try. He did not speak any English. So his comprehension He relied on the content that he knew. He relied on being able to somewhat decode and somewhat figure out what the test was asking him. So when we have those, in Texas, for example, our tests in all content now include a little bit of the writing piece, and it's called structured response or constructed response. We are all worried about that because we're worried about writing. But to me, it's almost like a blessing in disguise, because maybe it forces us to focus a little bit more on the language that our students are to produce. So we have to focus on writing and speaking in the classroom. Our kids could be just sitting there listening. So teacher talk dominates classroom. We don't want to have adults who are able to understand but not able to speak and not able to write. And our kids are going to join workforce, and we want them to be successful in life, and they need to be able to have that functional literacy piece that is so important. So when we look at the foundational concepts of writing, just something to remember, that writing requires that lots of different automated skills that have to be in place in order for us to produce a piece of writing. And it's much more, sometimes like many things have to be automated, where I need to know the alphabetic code. I need to be able to spell somewhat. I need to be able to put the words together to make a sentence. So it's that domain that takes the longest to develop. So we do need grace and patience for ourselves and for our students. And we cannot expect our kids to produce language simply because they understand. So they do need lots and lots of practice. So for the most part, this resource really came together as the concept that, okay, so I taught a lesson. My students walk away maybe with the max of understanding of the concept, but what do I do to give them additional opportunity to practice? So there are all the activities that are in the book are focused on that idea that to build the writing skill, you need to practice. So it cannot be mechanical drill and kill, because the research tells us those mechanical drills that we find in the workbooks, they do not build language proficiency. They build bored students who barely stand awake and stay awake. So the activities there are in the book are focused on, okay, so here's the skill that I want my students to develop. What can I put in place to get them do something with a language that is not boring, that is not a worksheet, and that develops that writing skill?
Natalia, from your research, when you look at writing, what have you found out the correlation between writing and that emergent bilingual student? I mean, you just started talking about it a little bit right there, but I love that the focus on the skill development, on how they can access their learning and how important that is. But from your research, what have you found out, and how did that research drive what you're trying to accomplish for these students?
So when I started reading research, it explained some things that I saw in the classroom, and I actually learned a long time ago when I first started learning languages, and I forgot, because you become so comfortable. Like speaking English is right now, it's almost like breathing. And we have many educators who speak other languages or came from learning or came to learn English, but because it becomes so natural, we forget how hard it was at first. So when we talk about some skills, for example, from the research, so there are some things in the language that are easy to teach and hard to acquire. And I'll give you an example. Past tense, easy to teach. I mean, what else is there? It's just like to add ed or use the second column of the irregular verb table, right? Hard to acquire. Kids will continue making that error. Or articles, the or an. No matter how many years you're in the country, I've been here for 25 years, I still make errors in those articles. And here's why. So research explains it. It tells me they're low communicative value. So it does not matter that I don't have those in my first language, but I need to know as an educator, I cannot look at the students' writing and say, oh, look, they still miss past tense after 2-3 years in the country. Let's put them in remediation class and just sit there and do some basic work. They cannot, maybe let's work on the essay or work on the higher skills or rigor. I need to know that these are those low communicative value elements that will continue showing up as an error, but it does not detract from my students' ability to participate in rigorous grade level tasks of a composition. So knowing that gives me peace of mind as a teacher. I did not do anything wrong. That's just how languages work. I taught past tense. I taught articles. My kids still make mistakes. That's a normal thing. That's just that part of language acquisition. So setting realistic, knowing that helps us set realistic goals and gives us a little bit of peace of mind, knowing that that's how language acquisition process works. So that's an example of that.
Nice. Thank you.
So, Natalia, I know that right now a lot of people, based on our podcast on Thursday, and the reality is that we've been on this show talking to educators from all over the United States. Right now, the East Coast and Central United States, they're facing what we dealt since the 80s in Texas. We've been dealing with this for years and years, and everybody else is finally getting hit. So you come up with an idea of, are we all in for EB students? Are we all in it? What do you mean by that? I think I understand what you're saying, but right now it's kind of hard when we have those conversations with people in Iowa, people in Massachusetts or New Jersey that are getting swamped, and they haven't had the skills. So what do you think? What do you say? What do you mean when you say are we all in for EB students?
So I'm glad you brought it up, and I think this is something that is so important. We look at the content, and in the Building Better Writers book, I do look at the content. So it's the resource not about just to how encourage students to write, but really teaching students to write, which is different from encouraging students to write. It's the content-focused book. However, and in my heart of hearts, it is just like one of the goals that I want to bring to educate or share with educators as my personal goal is to have that belief in the students that they can do it, can participate in everything that we do in the classroom if we give them the scaffolds, the proper scaffolds. And here's when it comes really not just, talk the talk, because we use the word scaffold every other probably 20 minutes in a conversation about EB students. It just becomes something that is like a buzzword. But when we build a lesson, and very often it's something that you observe probably if you go into it as administrator, go into the classrooms, you probably see it more often in the lessons when it comes to grammar piece, when it comes to writing. If I create a lesson or plan something, thinking just that's just a belief, where's my belief, that not everybody is able to participate in that. That frees me from the responsibility of being effective. If I go into planning that lesson thinking, well, I have those language learners in my class, they're probably not going to be able to do it. So I'm just going to go for the whatever 20, 30% of students who are going to be for sure going to be able to participate. That detracts from my effectiveness because I'm already preemptively giving them the way out. And I don't want for this to happen. So one of the parts of the book is directed for about the sentence level instruction, or how to create those grammar lessons with comprehensible input. Meaning that if as a teacher, I need to be able to create the lesson where everyone can participate at the extent of their ability. So what does it look like? If I have a sentence on my board that is so complicated, I'm teaching, let's say, compound sentences. Like my compound sentence, really all I need is to have two parts. They're both have a subject and a verb in each part, punctuated correctly, complete idea, conjunction, blah, blah, blah. So if I take an example that is so high at that vocabulary level, where I know it's not going to be accessible to all of my students, I'm excluding them from the lesson. So when I select my materials, when I select what I'm going to write on that board, I'm going to be thinking, will everyone have the access to the language? Is my example going to be accessible? Am I selecting that sentence example or pattern or that the kids can understand? And our kids are not deficient in cognition. No matter what their language level is, they can understand what a compound sentence is. It's not if I choose a proper example that's at their comprehension level, I can model. A different question is, do you understand as a teacher the concept clearly enough to be able to explain it in simple words? And if you're telling me I can't explain it in simple words too hard, you probably don't understand it clearly enough. So it's just when we look at the workbooks that are written for native speakers of English, very often the vocabulary is too high. It's not appropriate. It's not relevant. It's either boring, it's just everyone's going to be bored to death, or they can't relate to that. So a couple of things when we build those lessons: will everyone understand my example? Is it relatable? Does it spark the interest? Are they interested enough to look up and notice that example on the board? Is it something that creates the memory cue or memory? Just is it memorable enough? So having a relationships with the students, knowing who the students are, so we could find those points of connection to the students. Can we set the workbook to the side? Think about it as a guide. It's not something I might be writing on my board, because even and I've been to the classroom where the entire class is almost native speakers of English or really high proficiency kids. And the example on the board is so convoluted that very few kids can read it. So that might not be a good choice for that modeling of that pattern that I want to teach. So it's just what choices that we make, they have to be geared towards the students that we work with, so that everyone is able to participate in that.
Natalia, I love that stuff you're talking about. I got a question here from Sean Moriarty in Massachusetts, and I love this question. How can AI tools be a strong scaffold for ELLs in language and curriculum content acquisition? And I love that. AI is here to stay. Now, how can AI, artificial intelligence, be used?
Now, one of the things that, and I'm telling you right away, I'm not an expert in AI. AI came out after I was out of the classroom, and the only answer I can give you is based on what the educators tell me, because every single training that I have, somebody comes up and says, come, let me show you how I use AI in the classroom. Yep. So one of the things that I really that I loved, and it's making texts. If you can take a text and if you can plug it in, and if you can ask the AI program, whatever you use, to adapt it to a certain level, it gives us versatility. So we can take any text and adapt it to the level of any student. So that's one of those beautiful ways to make language accessible. So if I have various proficiency levels in the same classroom, and I know tomorrow we'll be reading this text, I can give them different versions, and I can make that adaptable. So immersive readers is an example to me. There's so many different programs. There's some names, Irina, Michelle Shorey, and Irina. Oh my gosh, I forgot her last name. There's two ladies who have a website, and I'm going to drop it in the link. But I would refer you to there's experts in technology and everything that has to do with supporting emerging bilinguals with technology. They talk about this, they share, and one of their favorite ones are immersive reader. So that one is really helpful.
Great stuff. AI is here to stay, and I love if that can help benefit kids or teachers in any capacity when it comes to helping the students. All right, I'm going to circle back to my question. When giving grace to our teachers who work with EB students, how does that tie into writing? I mean, I get it. You have to have grace when people are learning. You have to be able to be learning is a slow process for some. There's no doubt about it. You got to find the pieces that are adjustable and amenable for overall growth. So from your lens, giving grace to our teachers who work with EB students, how does that tie into writing? What does that mean? What does that look like?
Now, there's a couple of shows that you just did that I listened to, and I think Andrea said that. She talked about microscopic viewpoint, or looking at the student microscopically, and like microscopic point of view and then a telescopic point of view. I love that. I thought it was really interesting. So I think I said it correctly. I'm not sure, but that's what the concept was.
You did.
She was saying, we can't just look at the child as a snapshot or just very in a granular manner. I can look at the student writing and I can say, well, there are no commas and there's no past tense and everything, and they don't even know what third person singular is, and everything is wrong. And that would be that one piece of paper does not represent your child. It might be a snapshot of what the student is now, but that is not the whole story, and that is not where the child will be in the spring. So I'm a big proponent of portfolios. And if you're a writing teacher, and if you have emerging bilinguals, and if you do not have portfolios in your classroom, you're missing out on an opportunity to see or to develop that more of a telescopic view of your students, where you can see progress, where you can see how they grow. And if you do not ask them, give me your writing, or put it in the folder, we're going to look at it at the end of the year. Or if you're lucky, because I was lucky to stay with the same kids for sometimes 3 years, because I had them for English 1, for English 2, and for practical writing. So I actually have right now in my garage some of the folders for the kids from the beginning of the first year all the way through the years for 3 years. And that's treasure. That's a treasure. See, I heard myself say it wrong, and I wanted to self-correct. But this is something to cherish, because we can't just look at it and say, well, this child probably is not going to be successful on my end of course. I might give them some of the work that they might be working on that particular skill. That's great. But can I see that progress, or can I visualize it? If I cannot visualize it for that student as a teacher, it might be hard for that child to see themselves successful. And that stress level that we may experience, the pressure of accountability, it's very easy to kind of like diminish the child to the score that I can squeeze out of them by the end of the year, and miss out on the big picture, because there's a human being that grows and that can surprise you. Many of our kids succeed, and they supersede our expectations. So if you have beginners right now, pure beginners who can barely write a sentence, in a year, in 2, or if you're lucky to see them in 3 years, you're going to see so much growth. And that's where that grace and patience, and you might not be there to witness their success. As a teacher, we sometimes only have them maybe like semester or 2, but it's just being able to have that mindset of progress versus that achievement that the child can produce in one day or snapshot.
Perfectly said. Thank you.
So you go in one corner of a boxing ring, you got blooms. In the other corner of the boxing ring, you got Mr. Maslow right there. And after everything that you just discussed right now, with that first year that don't know how to write a sentence, to that third year that probably advanced high, hopefully, when we get into that battle, elaborate on how Mr. Maslow will always take down Mr. Bloom's. Talk to the audience about that.
Okay, so all the Bloom proponents are going to be, I need to do this probably. Because I'm going down with all the Bloom people, I'm not going to be happy. I'm the Maslow team, and it's not to say like, okay, preemptively. And just, this is something that we all have to kind of like be aware of and be careful. Statistically, we know that our language learners are in a classroom, in a typical classroom. I asked fewer high rigor questions on average. And if they, so we either not ask questions at all or asked fewer high level questions. So yes, we do want to keep in mind that there has to be rigor in questioning. There has to be rigor in type of writing assignments or type of writing prompts that we ask students to complete. We cannot be writing enough. This is just not for the ELA classroom, or how I use math at home is not a math writing prompt. It's entirely useless. It should not ever be asked to writing you want about how I use math at home. But if I'm asking students to write, I want to be purposeful with why am I asking them to write? It has to be directly linked to the TEAK, or sorry, not TEAK, learning goal. TEAK is a Texas thing. Did you see Mr. Packard's face? I was like, what is that? So learning goal, if I am asking them to write, and it does have to have that rigor built in. Otherwise, our students do perceive it as a useless task. But at the same time, it has to be feasible. And that's when it comes to Maslow. And we very often, what we think when we think about those needs is the sense of safety and the sense of belonging, which is great. But that's the bottom of the pyramid. There's a top to that thing, and at the top is self-esteem and self-realization. And what are some tasks in my class that will allow my students to experience a win, experience joy and success from learning? And I can't hit them on the head with bloom until they're ready, and so that, because I want them to be successful. So yes, it has to be a rigorous task. But if it's not perceived by the student as feasible, it will not be, I will not be motivated to participate to the full of my potential. So if I know where my students are, if I know their linguistic or their language proficiency level is, I will be able to select those appropriate tasks, because we have to be realistic in our expectations. So when I create, and just to connect it to that writing class or writing instruction, when I build a lesson, if I build a lesson where I'm thinking, well, they won't be able to do that, how does that affect my students' self-esteem? Right. Where is that opportunity to experience a win or experience joy from participation? Kids can tell when we are doing any assignment or planning anything, thinking, well, you're not going to be able to do that, or you're not. It's just that excluding preemptively, almost like before even they try, but instead of supporting and scaffolding. So yes, that the need to be successful and experience success supersedes the whatever my questioning technique I have to absolutely use in this classroom. It's just the students first.
Natalia, you said it right there. The bottom line is this, and Josh and I will tell you, kids don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And it starts right there. But you created a great roadmap for anybody out there listening to this show tonight about how to reach and stretch not only teachers, but students, EB students, to help them meet with maximum success and efficiency. And I'll tell you, it's people like you that really move the needle for our neediest kids at times. And at the end of the day, to learn the language, to be able to put it all into practice and make it relevant is a hard thing to do. But it's also a slow journey that takes love, compassion, empathy, and a direction. And the roadmap you put together today was outstanding. So thank you. Thank you so much. Josh, what do you think?
I think it's great. Hey, Andrea, Natalia, I'm sorry, Andrea. Natalia, please show us your book.
Bingo.
And where can
there it is.
Awesome. Where can people get that?
So Sidelets Education and Amazon, if you have Prime, free delivery, of course. So there's better choice, but Sidelets Education. And actually we have a online conference coming up on November 14th, where you can spend 2 hours with me learning about the book and playing through some activities. The majority of the book is really not the research. It's all of the activities. For the purple ones for the sentence level, the orange ones for the writing unit for the composition level. So a lot of it is, and they're no longer than 10 minutes slot in the classroom. So if I want to practice this skill, here's the game or an activity for it. And if you join us, we will play as many as fits into those 2 hours.
That's
awesome. Thank you, Natalia, for that tonight. And we appreciate you giving us a lot of the valuable information that's out there. But hey, you know what, Dean? It's not over.
No,
it is not over. This Tuesday, office hours, 9 p.m. Eastern, a 20-minute problem-solving show. 20 minutes. That's Dean. We have to go for 20 minutes. We gotta ring the bell at 20.
I get it.
So if you're out there, you want to be an administrator, you're an administrator. We're gonna give you a scenario, and I'm gonna ask you, what would you do? No fake stuff. Everything that's been presented since last season and this season are real live events that have happened. So we're hoping to see you at office hours this Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern. Thank you for being here. Remember, Fantastic Four on Saturday, Sean Hurd, Shika Houston, and Principal Cafele, and then joining us at the flagship show on Sunday night. Let's go home.
Outstanding once again, Josh, man. You always close so well. Natalia, thank you so much. Thank you so much for what you do for your district. Just great stuff, your kids, and for the country now. You're talking about with this open line PD and being an author. You're just opening up pathways for people to be great. That's all we ask for in education. Keep striving to become a little bit better so you can help kids reach their ultimate goals. So thank you so much. We appreciate that. One last 15 seconds of fame right now. Here you go. What are you going to tell those teachers out there right now? Something about EB students that they didn't know. It's all yours. What do you got for us?
Oh my goodness, no pressure at all. You should have
No
given
pressure, none.
Okay, believe in your students. They'll surprise you.
They will surprise you. Bingo.
And they'll always remember you.
They will. And I'll tell you what, that relationship right there will always lead to something better down the road. There it is right there, everybody. Listen, have a great week. Natalia, thank you so much for joining us. Once again, you know what it's all about, getting better every single day. Natalia, please hold on for a moment. We are going to sign off. Have a great week, everybody, and enjoy the opportunity to be with your students.